love it.
Okay, and we're live on Instagram. All right, now let me check this thing. Streams are working. Yep, all good. Okay, check one more thing. And we'll get started kind of right away because we got a lot to talk about this morning. I'm just going to jump straight in. People are starting to gather in, and it's okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's HAL Sparks Mornings Mega Worldwide, the Hump Day edition. Today, our guests are the Major and Philip ITTNER will be joining us second hour. And before I get into the conversation, I want to remind everybody, like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, support the show. Patreon.com/HALSparks. The Venmo's up. The little card, the little moon is up there in case you want to tip via Twitch and the other stuff. And what other business do I have to do? Oh, yeah. Memberships on YouTube, etc. Okay, there, I've done it, and I feel better for having done it. Now, let's get into the real reason we're here, which is our conversation with Major Ojeda joining us right now, turnleftpack.org, and a model American, if I may say so my damn self. Now, we were talking before the show got started, and I interrupted you because I wanted you to save some of this for the air. And it won't, I don't want it to eat up our entire conversation because, again, the shooter is innocent till proven guilty, if he is indeed the shooter at all, and all the stuff about the United Healthcare CEO being shot. Let me say right out of the gate, I am firmly against anyone being shot in the back for any particular reason, and especially when it's to try and kill a system that person may represent in some ways, but won't actually affect that part of it. But the greater conversation about the fairness of healthcare and my own personal beliefs about where that's going to go over the next 5 or 10 years, no matter what anybody does. We'll get into that a little bit. But the Major, you were saying, like, that was it Blue Cross and Blue Shield or whatever? We're making this decision about how long anesthesia, how long you could be under anesthesia before they started charging you because they were setting time limits on medical procedures.
Yeah, they basically were looking at every single type of procedure and saying, okay, well, this procedure takes 1 hour of anesthesia. This procedure takes 3 hours of anesthesia. And what they were going to do is that if something happened, if the doctor got inside and realized there were some issues, and they were going to basically extend the surgery from 3 hours to 5 hours, when you woke up, you were going to get a second bill because the insurance agents, the insurance company was not going to continue paying for that insurance past that time. Now, that's the plan that they were pushing. And they canceled that plan after the assassination of the other CEO, United Health, I believe. Yeah. But here's the thing. This is the thing with insurance. Insurance agents will show up at your front door and they will tell you how they can cover your home, they can cover your car, they can cover your health. They don't tell you that the moment that you need them, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to try to figure out how they can pay you, but not pay you everything that you're supposed to get. They're going to tell you that, well, your televisions have to be depreciated. They were obviously a couple years old, and your appliances and blah, blah, blah. And basically what it comes down to is they're not going to give you the full amount that you think you're going to get.
Right.
And, that's the kind of thing that you have to understand. That's one of the problems that people face. And that's one of the reasons why, like this guy who is the potential shooter, they've already showed his x-rays. He's had some spinal fusion, lots of pain in his lower back. And I guess, he was kicked off insurance. I don't know.
Right.
But I mean, nobody condones, being the judge, jury, and the executioner. Right. That is unacceptable. But you also have to understand that, there's a lot of frustration. Right now we are sitting here in a world where we are watching a man who is an absolute criminal. I don't care. He's a criminal. And he has surrounded himself with billionaires and sycophants. And billionaires in leadership roles are not going to benefit the people. It's not going to happen. Let me tell you something. I earned my retirement because I spent 20 plus years in the military, and I spent my time in 82nd Airborne Division, the 20th Airborne Engineers, 10th Mountain Division. I spent my time in good, solid, hardcore unit. I deserve every penny that I get from my retirement. And the truth is I probably should have gotten a lot more, because everybody that spends 20 plus years in the military, they give their youth, they give their health to Uncle Sam. That's a fact.
Yep.
So, and then, I deserve my disability, because over the course of those 20 plus years, you broke me. I had a foot surgery, 3 knee surgeries, both shoulders operated on, traumatic brain injury. I got sleep apnea. I got tinnitus. I got hearing loss. I mean, all these different things. So, now all of a sudden we are looking at Donald Trump elevating a guy that's worth $850 million, Vivek Ramaswamy, and a guy who has $360 billion, where that if he spent like $1 million a day, it would take him 800 years to spend his wealth.
Right.
And these are the guys that are literally saying, we're going to cut my benefits. My benefits.
Yeah.
These guys never picked up a rifle and manned a post. Donald Trump was too chicken shit to pick up a rifle and man a post. But they're going to now work to take from us, to take from me, to take the ability for me to make sure that my wife is going to be able to live comfortably. No.
Yeah.
No.
I agree.
It's not going to happen.
When we're talking about, like, and again, innocent until proven guilty, we don't know if he's the guy. We have to maintain that or whatever. But when you hear stuff about him being, having a back injury or whatever, and I'm sure you're aware of this, there is, my dad has had, because of his, he's on dialysis and they have to do it from home and all this other stuff. And he's got, because he has to sit in this chair during it several days a week at a really weird position, his sciatica acted up, and it was one of those things, and anybody who has sciatica knows this. My girlfriend Summer has to deal with it sometimes because as a dancer, it's the wear and tear on your body is rough. Anybody who's had any chronic illness for any length of time or a chronic pain issue or still does knows that there's like a maddening factor to it. It is emotional. It is, especially when you're not sleeping and you're not like on a personal level, like it starts to eke into your relationships, into your work, right? Yeah. It's and I remember when Harvey Milk was killed and the guy used the Twinkie defense. Remember, it was too much sugar and it made him nuts or whatever. It's completely ridiculous, but there is something to be said, and I'm curious if there is this to be had, that there is a chronic pain element of this, because it can affect your emotional state. It can affect your judgment. It can affect your feelings towards your loved ones, much less anybody you might blame for it. And again, this is not forgiving it, but it can certainly impact how you can process that pain, right? And process that.
Yeah, you are spot on. I'm going to tell you now, I've had both my rotator cuffs torn and repaired. Oof. And I'm going to tell you, when you have a torn rotator cuff, you feel like somebody has Charlie horsed you right in the arm, the arm here. It's up here, but you feel more pain right here. And I'm going to tell you, when you go through that period of time, because when I had my rotator cuffs messed up, I didn't want to run off and go to surgery because I still wanted to do the things I wanted to do, even though they were painful. And I'm going to tell you, you know what? After you are in pain for so long, you become snappy.
Yeah.
You don't want to talk about things. Let me tell you, so you're right. It will affect your relationship with your loved ones if you basically are living with pain. And now this guy here with the lower back issues, I've had my lower back, mid back, upper back, and neck, all the discs, degenerative, slipping. I have serious pain in my back. And I'm going to tell you, my back isn't fused together.
Right.
This guy probably has been living in real bad pain for quite some time. And then, when you decide you want to get it looked at and your insurance company tells you, nah, we're not going to pay for that. I mean, that's a slap in the face. And you think, I've been paying insurance for this many years. And that's one of the things. We pay into insurance every single month. And, you may go 10, 15 years and never one time ever need your car insurance. Right. So when something happens and you call your car insurance, you expect them to take care of the issue. But what usually happens is they say, okay, well, they're going to try to fight you on it. And then they're going to raise your premiums because you actually had to use them. And it's easy to make insurance companies the villain. It is. Yeah. It's just like it's easy to make, for me, to make Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk the enemies of us, of military people, because you're coming for us. You've told us that you're coming for us. How dare you, who have never picked up a rifle and manned a post, say that we are basically getting rich off of our benefits? Let me tell you something. And that's the thing. Elon Musk talking about ripping Social Security out by the root. Understand that Social Security for the average American is about $1,200 a month. That doesn't even cover rent in 95% of this country. Right. But yet we're going to allow a people who have more wealth than they could ever use in this lifetime. If we just said, I'll tell you what we want to do. We're going to go ahead and tax Elon Musk, and we're going to let Elon Musk pay into Social Security on every dollar that he makes, like the rest of us do, that make below $125,000. Let me tell you something. That right there alone would save friggin' Social Security. But they want to kill it. They want to take away what little a lot of our elderly people have.
Again, I dig deep into, and let me remind somebody, and somebody said that's no excuse for murder in the chat room, and you're absolutely right. Let me show you something real quick, if I may, before we move on to the next little bit. Sorry, right here you go. See this guy right here? Okay, this guy named Gamble Rogers. Gamble Rogers was the troubadour emeritus of Ocklawaha County, Florida, and was a comedian and a musician who could play and sing like he was two separate people. He was one of the sweetest human beings you will have ever met in your entire life. I saw him when I was a kid. My dad took him to see him because I listened to his records when I was a little kid, and just super talented. He died because there was a flash flood at I want to say it was the Kentucky River, but it was down. It might have been at the edge of Tennessee, wherever they were. He died because this flash flood swept a bunch of bathers into the water, and he dove in after and came up with 4 of them, saved 4 people, went in after the 5th, and never came back. He died in the process. His entire back was fused solid. He could barely, when he was almost funny in his gesturing and comedic in the way that he would move and gesture because he couldn't move his back. And this guy ended his life saving 5 people, saving 4 and attempting to save a 5th. So the idea that it's an excuse is not what we're saying here. And maybe the idea that you even believe it's an excuse is part of the problem. I believe all acts of mass murder and violence like that are acts of ego, and they are just an expression of who you are truly as a person, as opposed to, something that you turn into. But let me, if you've never heard Gamble Rogers or never, I understand, because you wouldn't have. But he was an amazing talent and a lovely human being. They've named a park after him because of what he did. And there's a Bluegrass Music Fest named after him that happens every year. And his back was every bit as bad, if not worse, than whatever this kid's was. So understand, this isn't about the excuse. And in a time where you couldn't even get insurance to deal with it, you just lived with it, right? There was no option to deal with it. So again, real important to get that across the line, so we could get a scale on reality of what we expect for our fellow human beings. Yeah,
we're not condoning
not at all.
the murder of anybody, right. but you also it's one of those things where how far do people allow themselves to be pushed? There needs to be other ways that people can call out the insurance companies.
Well, again, I agree. And I also think that it's interesting. We're talking about, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. There's a question of whether this kid would have done this had he not been rich himself. He comes from an influential family, and again, innocent until proven guilty. But the idea is that the ego of somebody who's wealthy, that they could just, I'm in pain, therefore I can take your life away, is kind of part and parcel. This kid has more alignment with Elon Musk and saying, you don't have the right to live at my expense if I perceive it as such, which is exactly where Elon Musk comes from, right? It's exactly where Vivek Ramaswamy, why are you alive? And I think in a lot of ways, there's this, it branches over into the RFK thing, which I want to talk about a bit too. Talk about living a life of privilege and ease, and you can eat and do whatever the fuck you want because thanks to Walter Reed, you can fuck around, be a heroin addict most of your life and eat worm-infested fucking raw goat meat someplace because when you come home, you're not going to the VA. Your uncle and your father were, in the White House where you've got Walter Reed to look forward to. They will pick up the fucking slack. You will get government health insurance, so you can fuck around all you want, and the taxpayer will clean up after you. And this idea that like he deserves that magically somehow because a shot of sperm put him in that position. And his parents developed the thing so that they could pass that on to their progeny, and he was lucky to be one of them. Versus, well, these people don't deserve this, even though they served in the military, they lived through this shit or whatever, and that's going to take away from the privilege that I experience and want, which is exactly like, again, RFK Jr., Elon Musk, they're all these like families of privilege. And not of their own making. You could argue that the moderating voice amongst them seems to be in the interviews that I've seen, because I've watched long form interviews of all these people to try and get a picture of where they're really going, what they'll really do. Everything people are saying about Kash Patel as a problem is absolutely true, right? He's a nutcase. He's vindictive and stupid. That'll all happen, and that will come out. I think everything that people are saying about Tulsi Gabbard, absolutely true. Just a fucking sock puppet for Assad and for Putin. Like clear in everything she says. If you go back, especially knowing now that she took private trips and secret trips there, go back and look at what she said. And you'll go, oh fuck, there are red flags all over the fucking place. But Ramaswamy, interestingly enough, is like the moderating voice of Doge, and he starts talking nice about most federal workers are doing their job and blah, blah, blah. A lot of that has to do with, of this group, yes, he's a millionaire, yes, but he's way more self-made. He didn't buy his company the way Elon Musk did. That he's maybe got a toe in the, and browner than the rest of them put together. Maybe he's got, a part of his brain that goes, nah, these guys aren't necessarily my friend the way I want them to be. I want them to think I am, and it's business, but like that hesitation, and that's what I've seen. But when we come to RFK Jr., this whole thing, like he's the next one, and this relates to, I think, healthcare, what we're talking about, is that we're going to see, more of his shit come out, not the stuff necessarily about his wife's suicide and his just shitty behavior and him being a self-involved scumbag and his own, like, he basically ran for president as a way of like fucking anti-vaxxer hippie chicks all over the country, which is what he spent his time doing during the entire campaign. One of the things that keeps getting brought up, and I'm from Kentucky, he's from West Virginia. We both know that there are teeth problems in both of our states. And a lot of that has to do with quality of water, toxins in the environment, and the lack of fluoride. And so the reason they fluoridated the water in a lot of these places is because rotten teeth, cause heart problems and all kinds of other shit, right? So the idea is you put a little bit of fluoride in the water, it hardens your tooth enamel, and then all the other healthcare problems you get, which is, cardiovascular issues that are related to this stuff, you don't get them because you don't have holes in your teeth where bacteria can get into your circulation easier than they would through any other way, the way you'd get a septic cut. Your mouth is constantly engaged with the outside world in a way that this skin is not, unless it breaks, right? If your gums and your teeth are weak, that's what it leads to. So that's why the government at one point said we need fluoride in the water, and it worked. 25 to 40% fewer cavities in everywhere that has fluoridation. If you take it out, it all goes up, and it relates a lot to this. You don't swallow it when it's in your toothpaste, all this shit. Anyways, okay, so why do all these assholes focus on that, as part of what he's going to fix? Yeah.
Look, at the end of the day, I mean, dentists support fluoride in the water, and in places like Kentucky and West Virginia, I mean, we used to have to, I believe it was weekly, they would give us this little tiny paper cup, and we would have to swish it in our mouth and spit it out. And it was
because they didn't have it in our water systems. I did the same thing in Peaks Mill. So I lived out in Peaks Mill, outside of the city. Our water was brought in by the city and poured into our cistern, like after it had basically just been boiled. So it didn't have fluoride or anything else in it. So when every kid in Peaks Mill and out in Owenton and Schweitzer and all these places, you do that. And we did it at school for a while. Yep. And the reason is it heads off a bunch of these. Okay, so why do the sort of right-wing fringe hate it so much? Twofold. And I dove into this because I was like, what is the fucking problem? Like, there are a couple of things where like vaccines and autism, they believed that for a while. It spiked in the 90s. You remember when it happened. It has a lot to do with like Russian disinfo trying to undermine the outreach that America had. Our State Department, instead of declaring war, we tried to build alliances. And one of the ways we did it was with healthcare, vaccinating people, trying to cure, AIDS, malaria, all these other things. And Russia and China would head off those things because they don't want that to happen, because they don't want those countries to make friends with us. They want to take them by force. So they put an article in the Hindu Times in India or whatever, and it was released in Africa that the CIA was behind AIDS to keep them from, people from practicing safe sex, so they would just die off sooner, and so that they wouldn't trust us to treat them and the like, so they would die sooner. So they could take these areas. Right. Okay. So what's the two running myths? And I had to dig deep to find this. I'm like, what the fuck is the ongoing thing? You know what it is? Evangelicals read something a long time ago about high levels of fluoride adding to calcification to the pineal gland, and pineal gland being the primary way that it is like, to quote Belloc, it is like an antenna for talking to God. Which is what they said about the Ark of the Covenant. And the idea is that your spiritual connection, your third eye, all that stuff, that idea, if you calcify the pineal gland, you can't contact God anymore. God can't get through to you. The antenna is broken, and therefore it's like printing atheists. That's what they think. That's what all this, after all this shit, as I started to dig deeper into it, like, what is the fucking problem? Like, I don't know, major doses of it, osteoporosis in mice, if they, give them half their body weight in it or whatever. What's the fucking thing? Why are they so hardcore about this? That's why. Because they believe it calcifies your pineal gland, which it doesn't, unless you eat, half your body weight in fluoride twice a year. And wow. Yeah. And they believe that if you calcify the pineal gland, it creates a shield wherein God can't connect to you. And therefore, the commies are putting fluoride in the water to calcify everyone's pineal gland so we stop going to church. That's really what they believe. I was like, it took so long to okay, but why? Okay, but why? Okay, but why? And I kept fucking digging down into this to where it would fucking stop. And that was bedrock. That
right there, to me, that would have been. I could see Marge the Trainwreck Green speaking about that specifically.
Roseanne, they all think this. They all do. I'm not kidding. I am not kidding at all. This is actually why they're against it.
Wow.
And I was like, and again, the vaccine. You watch. The next conversation will probably be about how vaccines didn't cause autism, so they're fine. We'll just leave them alone. It's actually fluoride that caused the autism, because if you consume half your body weight of it twice a year, it'll give you neurological problems. But to quote fucking Cat Williams, aspirin, if you have a headache, 2 aspirin will take care of that. But if you take 12 of those motherfuckers, it'll be the last headache you ever had, right? That's everything is bad in a massive overdosing. But that's really where it comes from. And these motherfuckers elevated this dickhead. This is what this is going to be about. This is what they're really, this is like all the coded language about God, removing God from schools and all that kind of stuff. When did that fucking start? Same time the fluoride shit started. Oh my God.
Let me tell you, man, honestly, I am honestly sitting here, and I've been feeling this way for the last probably few weeks. I'm just hoping that something happens. I'm hoping somebody steps in. I'm hoping that they find some evidence someplace, because I mean, goodness gracious, I see us going. We're on the path of a dictatorship. We know that. Well,
here's the thing. I agree with you on one instance, because I think that's what they have in mind. But Trump, especially in his Kristen Welker, all but a couple of things, which is shit he grinds on his own, has been walking back almost everything he said, with the exception of the deportation stuff, which he triples down on, because I don't think he has the mental capacity to understand what's involved in it. He thinks it's going to be it'll be easy, it'll be bad press, but it'll be like a Band-Aid. We just have to pull it off. He has no idea how it's like pulling out the circulatory system of Texas, right? That if you do this, you are it's like, he thinks it's like removing the appendix. Okay? He really thinks this, that you could do it frontier surgery. But but it's really like removing half the capillaries in your body. And once they start, it's going to be fucking ugly, and you might kill the patient in the process. And that's where a lot of these Republicans are like, he doesn't really mean it. The reason they're saying it is because they know they're going to have to throw everything they can into stopping him. And that's going to be fucking 80% of his activity.
Well, I mean, you sit and listen to them talk about how immigrants paid like $92 billion in taxes last year.
Right.
And it's going to cost $88 billion to round these people up and, kick them out of the country.
Right.
And, I'm at this point now where it's like, what the hell? I mean, I don't see them doing this. But then again, too, I am listening and watching so many people out there that are in the find out phase. Mm-hmm. For every single person that came from Cuba on a daggone fucking raft that made it to the United States of America and then literally wanted to slam the door behind them so that nobody else could come in here. How fucking dare you? Who the hell you think you are? I mean, and let me tell you something. There's going to be a period of time when I'm going to be like, hell, I told you so. Right. We didn't just tell you Project 2025 was bad. We gave you the page numbers, and you didn't friggin' take the time. You lazy ass, racist, sexist, friggin' homophobic assholes is what we've had to deal with.
Well, this goes to who are the people that make the trek to America? And those would be the people who have the wherewithal to do it. There are a lot of people who would love asylum in the United States, or think they could make a future here, or want just a fucking perfunctory job, which they would make 10 times what they would make at home, and they could send 80% of it back home, and it would change everybody in their family's life forever. But they can't do it. They can't leave there to go risk it. They might die along the way. They might never come back. The only breadwinner in the family. There's a bunch of people that could never even start it. So who does? Those are the people with the physical or the financial ability to do so. And when it's the people who have the financial ability to do so, if they haven't gathered up the village's savings to pay for the coyote to get them across the border because that person's going to send money back to the village, which is this kind of old-fashioned 50s version of what used to happen, it's mostly because they're fairly well-to-do. And they came here because they're not well-to-do enough to come in through legal, or they don't want, ways, or they don't want to pay for that. But they got 10 grand In the case of the Chinese ones that are coming over, that are coming through San Diego, they got 30 grand to pay a coyote in cash. How many Americans have 10 or 30 grand sitting around that they could hand off for a trip in that regard? That might not work out. Just saying. Yeah. You might get sent back. So understand that the people that are making it through, especially the ones that are buying themselves, a lightning pass to get to the front of the line with the coyotes through the cartels, as Donald Trump's cartel fucking conveyor belt that he set up with his remain in Mexico process under Title 42, where people could just get kicked out and there's no adjudication, so they can try as many times as they want. It never goes on their record. So it's a fucking here's thanks for $10,000. Go. Oh, they sent you back. Here, take some drugs this time. Oh, they sent you back. Take some more drugs. Oh, here, take a gun. Right there. Each time they're just on this conveyor belt until they get in. Right. And then he's going to kick them all out, and a bunch of them are going to try again. The cartels are going to make billions of dollars on that shit. Never mind the criminals he's going to let go, because he's basically freeing them. What are they going to do? Go to a hero's welcome in fucking Guatemala or Mexico or wherever they were from initially when he releases them? They didn't commit a crime in that country, and they're not going to be put in prison there. So what are they going to do? Live on a fucking island? Be a fucking murderer for a cartel from now on with a couple of tattoos and 3 hots and a cot for a few years? It's fucking nuts. But the people that come through is like what you're talking about. The Cubans that came up and then shut the door behind them. Again, who are these folks? The ones that got to the front of the line. A lot of them, increasingly, paid their way to the front of the line. And they have much more in common with Trump and Elon Musk than they have with you're making
perfect sense. I've never heard it like that, but that makes absolute perfect sense.
Yeah.
That really does. They pay to get to the front, and the truth is maybe they don't want to be around poor people from Cuba. They believe now that they are here, that they're elevated, and that's sad. But I'll tell you another thing too. You do know that there's still children that have not been relocated with their parents.
Yep.
And I will tell you, I thought about this about a week ago. I thought about this, and I thought, you know what? I know why. Because a lot of those people that brought their kids with them, that had their kids taken from them, the reason why they're not showing up at the border and saying, give me my kid, is because they're hoping that we'll just basically put their kid in an orphanage, educate their kid, and maybe their kid will have a better life.
It'll be way better no matter what. Yeah.
Their life will be better than if I have to take them back to Guatemala or El Salvador. So it's a really, really horrible situation. But once again, I see, the things that Donald Trump wants to do. I see them hurting people, and I see them coming after people, and I'm worried that they know that if Donald Trump does follow through with the tariffs. And, you would think that by now Donald Trump would, because everybody knows it's horrible for the consumers. But once again, it's also a big chunk of money right up front that Donald Trump can get and give to his billionaire class. So I think that's why he's still going to push these damn tariffs. But, I sit here and I'm thinking to myself, my goodness gracious, how could we continue going down this path? He's going to hurt people. He's going to target people. Look, I don't sit here and claim that I'm all that in a bag of chips, and I'm sure you don't either.
I think you are, and I absolutely do. I think I'm all that and a side of fries. Whatever side you want, because I can deliver. Sorry, I did interrupt, but I would never let a moment of fake humility pass me by. Go ahead.
Well, but I'm like, you can see that he wants to go after the people that were on the January 6th commission and all this stuff. But you know what? You can also see that start to trickle down where he wants to go after other people, where all of a sudden the next thing you know, Glenn Kirshner, Brian Tyler Cohen, Michael Popak, the Midas brothers. They may come after all of us. And look, at the end of the day, do what you got to do. Yeah. Do what you got to do. We are living in a world where it would not surprise me that within the first 6 months of Donald Trump being back in office, that they don't try to literally do away with our Constitution. The Republicans told you that Bill Clinton was coming for your guns. Then
Right.
they told you that friggin' Barack Obama was coming for your guns. Then they said Hillary was coming for your guns. Then they said Joe Biden was coming for your guns. And right now, there's a video with Donald Trump sitting right next to his daggone new attorney general pick,
Yep.
that blonde female, where they're talking about seizing the guns.
Yep.
And once again, make no mistake about it, they know, Donald Trump knows that if Donald Trump wants to do the things that he wants to do, if he wants to make this country a dictatorship so that he gets to live the rest of his life as a king, he knows that they're probably going to have to go after the guns. And let me tell you something. You're fucking with the wrong people. You're fucking with the military, because we're the ones that actually know how to fucking fight. And you're talking about coming in and taking what we have earned and what we deserve. Now you're also talking about taking people's guns, and they're not going to put up with that bullshit.
Well, that's
so
the
you know what? Do what you got to do.
It's always projection. We know this about him. And now I want everybody, especially in MAGA world, to look back on what they warned you about Obama, what they warned you about Biden, what they warned you about Clinton, what they warned you about Kerry, for fuck's sake. I want you to go back and re-listen to what everything they said and understand that's what they're going to do. Because they have to. There is no situation, there is no dictatorship with where the people have guns. That's what they've always said. You got to be able to fight back against a tyrannical government. Well, if you want to be a tyrannical government, guess what, motherfucker? You're going to have to, solve that problem yourself. And one of the biggest warning signs, I think, should be Orban in Hungary. He keeps fucking, talking about how strong Putin is and how strong Orban is and how powerful they are and all this stuff. And same thing about Xi Jinping, right? And Kim Jong-un. Well, guess what? No, none of those countries have a right to bear arms. None of them. And Orban, fucking Hungary, has the hardest gun rules of any European state. Harder than France. Jesus Christ. Harder than Norway. There are stricter gun laws in Hungary than in the fucking Netherlands and Sweden, which we think, most Americans think of as like a hippie mushroom hooker paradise where there are no arms, right? Yeah. Oliver's saying how that's all gone down the memory hole. That's why I'm reminding people to go back and look. The other thing, too, is, and you're seeing this more and more, because it's rhino hunting season amongst these assholes. As much as I'm worried about, and I think rightly so, our ilk in the in the independent media, and that will be the low-hanging fruit that they could probably go after fairly easily. The people with the biggest targets on their back in this world are the people they perceive as rhinos, the betrayers, because that's how all cults work. That long before they start slaughtering the other tribe, they have to kill the impure among them. And that's exactly where all this shit is going. I want to, real quick, if I may, in relation to what we were talking about the ladder being pulled up behind. This is, just to educate people. There is a perception, mostly among our side of, the aisle, that America, being uniquely racist because we had slavery and we got rid of it, and we fought an ugly war about it, and we still have some dead enders who wish it hadn't gone away, that somehow that makes us unique in terms of racism in the world. It does not. And if you don't believe me, I recommend you go to China and stand in an elevator with 2 black people that don't speak Chinese and 5 Chinese people and listen to what they say. That, just for the record, I'm not saying all Chinese people in China are racist. I'm just saying if they're rich enough to be in an elevator, they are. So that said, Afro-descendant and indigenous people make up like 60 to 90% of the population in a lot of these countries, and they make up 80 to 90% of the poor in all these countries. Way more inequality based on race in Latin American countries than in the United States. So think of everything that you know about inequality and fucking redlining and all that shit, and understand that this is ongoing and a reason why a lot of people bug out, why they leave. And some of them are leaving because they want to escape this very thing. And some of them are leaving to escape all the brown people around them because they view themselves as better than them. So this is just a sampling. Okay, throughout Latin America, race and ethnicity continue to be among the most important determinants of access to opportunity and economic advancement. Indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples in Latin America represent about 40% of the total population, a sizable share. And yet, they remain a disproportionate segment of the poorest of the poor. While a priority for social inclusion measures, because the UN, because the United States, because we put all these things, like there was an article, fuck me, in New York Times about how America's sanctions against a mine in Venezuela put a lot of people out of work. And then you go, why? Oh, because they were raping and murdering all the indigenous people to make room for the mine. Well, fuck them. What are you talking about? All right. Anyways, it was nuts. Like the both siderism in that article was one of the most ferocious pieces of shit I've ever seen in my life. Okay. Let's see. In countries such as Bolivia, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Panama, and Paraguay, for example, over 60% of indigenous people and Afro-descendants are poor. American Quarterly has this social inclusion index to see how everybody does. So they're one of the measuring bodies that go through this. In Panama, for example, 90% of indigenous people live below the poverty line, and 69.5% live in extreme poverty, compared to 30% of non-indigenous population, which is from all over, but especially from Spanish European descent. In Peru, 34% of Afro-descendants live below the poverty line, compared to 23% of the mestizos. In Brazil, per capita monthly income for Brazilians of European descent are more than double those of Afro-descendants. Double. The general populace. We're not talking about income inequality amongst, think of the variance in the United States and what we fight back against, and rightly so. And the division between, long-term financial security for black and brown people in our country, and understand that it is quintuple in Brazil and other countries like that. I want people to grasp this, because it explains why a bunch of Latinos in certain states all banded together, and they seem to be all like, why are they applauding Trump for getting rid of these fuckers? Because they left their own country not for asylum or whatever they might be taking advantage of it, but to get away from these motherfuckers. They don't want them following them there. It's the same. Jesus Christ, people are the same all over. We're all fucking blood and sinew inside, whatever the color of your skin is, and everybody has the same possibility of a moral arc. Just because you were raised poor doesn't mean you'll be violent, doesn't mean you'll be good. It's up to you to make a decision about this. And a lot of these people who make a decision to come here, it's like Paul fucking Ryan. They're all Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan went to college because his father died, and he got SSI, he got Social Security, survivor benefits, and he went to university, and he ended up being fucking Speaker of the House because of that. And what was his answer? Wow, Social Security survivor benefits are a lifeline for people from my socioeconomic level. No, he was like, fuck that, I'm in, you're out. He was in a lifeboat, fuck you, anchors away. You have to understand, we on our side of the aisle, I feel like for a while, and again, this is because Republicans blanket attack people. They blanket Latinos, they blanket gays, trans people, that we feel we have to defend them in a similar way, which is equally kind of racist and in some ways denies their humanity. Okay, it says that they're equally innocent, instead of saying everybody is innocent until proven guilty, which is what we mean when we're defending people en masse. But it keeps us from looking any deeper because we're afraid we're giving them pouring fuel on their fire. When in reality, what we did was we denied the reality that a bunch of the people that they are aligning with themselves, and why he's all DACA friendly now in his interview. Why is that? Because these people are business owners now, because they work at chip fabs, because they were raised in the United States, and they own tech companies. That's why. It's not because he gives a fuck about people who are, these poor kids brought here when they were 2 years old. That's our feeling. That's how we feel about it. He's hijacking that feeling because it's good for business. And these people are telling him, don't you fucking dare. That's what this is about.
I'll be honest with you, man. I've never heard it in that way. I feel like I've just received yet another education on the HAL SPARKS show.
I try to be useful as well as ornamental, my friend. All that
I mean,
side
that
of reality.
absolutely makes a lot of sense. I mean, you know, I've always sit here and thought, how dare you sons of bitches come to America and then get here and shut the door behind you. But now, you know, that article alone right there kind of
the door wasn't open when they were there. The door was, they weren't supportive of these people in their own fucking country. They come here because the business opportunities and the possible lifestyle change and the generalized safety compared to their own country, because they have created mass poverty through the same kind of gutting of the system and the removal of protections that Trump and his ilk are trying to put in place. The problem is that they don't want that shit here. So they're all going to be doing tap dance. He's just bluffing about tariffs. He's just bluffing about removing these problems. He's not going to shut down the FBI, because the minute you do, that's, you know, they're like, we're a banana republic. If you think about it, we're a third world country. Fuck you. That's where they came from, and they know that's what causes it. Is, again, poverty doesn't cause crime. Crime causes poverty. And when you have either class, the upper class, the middle class, the lower class, or whatever, instituting a lot of crime, it destabilizes society. That's why we have the IRS and the white-collar crime bureaus all the way down to fucking beat cops, because there is a spectrum of humanity. There's a spectrum of criminality in the world. And all of it destabilizes fucking society. And that's why they escaped, for fuck's sake. The difference is that we seem to think that racism, in us trying to deal with it here, is unique to the United States. That the American system, that because we had chattel slavery as part of our economic system in the United States, that it is unique to the United States. 6% of the slaves taken from Africa came to North America. Where the fuck do you think the rest of them went? Why do you think that article is talking about Afro-descendant South Americans? Where the fuck did you come from? Right? They weren't.
Let me highlight to that, because everything you're saying is making a lot of sense. And for those who've never ever been around the Caribbean, you're going to find a lot of those countries down there. You know, you're going to be like, wow, you know, it's the majority of these people are people of color. And the reason for that's because when the slavery trade ended, it wasn't like those guys said, okay, guys, hop back on, we'll take you back home. No, they left them there. And that's why when you go to places like St. Thomas and St. Martin.
It continued. And just because we stopped it and the Brits stopped it doesn't mean it stopped. Like a big portion of African slaves after the Western slave trade stopped went to the Middle East. And there's still tons of that going on today. And they have a much stricter racial rule than we do. Again, and like you look at Haiti, the overthrow in Haiti that people talk about, the uprising in Haiti when it was a slave colony, that was owned and operated by the French. That's why French is this secondary European language. You would not believe how many people think, and it fucking boggles my mind, think that Spanish is the indigenous language of fucking South America. Where the fuck does the name come from? It's not even the indigenous. It's like there's not even a Canadian fucking language as much as they have they speak English. Where the fuck do you think that came from? Came over on a goddamn boat and it worked as a point, but like they didn't speak fucking Spanish. And I'm amazed. Like even Los Angeles, San Francisco, all these areas that were named after Spanish conquistadors and Spanish saints and all that kind of stuff, or the religious people because they were initially religious outposts, right? Yeah. But they're like, if people are like, the original name of this place is Los Angeles, means the city of angels, is San Francisco is named like, okay, first of all, St. Francis is fucking Italian. And and as the Catholic Church, the Roman Empire, as the Catholic Church rolled through Spain to help them fight off the Muslim hordes that turned Persia Arab, over time, because that wasn't indigenous. You think Farsi is the indigenous language of, Arabic is the indigenous language of Iran? Like, it's weird how many people think that our history starts and stops at like 1619 or 1492 or 1776. And most of the Marjorie Taylor Greene crowd fucking think it's 1776. Like 1785, that was when we really started to roll, baby. You're like, motherfucker, we weren't even like, there's like a fifth of this country existed then.
Yeah.
Right, get the fuck out of here. And still today, that's what I'm saying. Like, people should not be surprised that there is, that there are those who would come to the United States, just like those who make it to Europe, from Africa, for example, or from the Middle East, who don't want people to follow them. That's why they left. They do the same thing in Europe.
That makes perfect sense. And I don't know why I've never thought of it in that way, but it makes perfect sense. That's why
I'll tell you why you didn't.
Slam the door behind them.
I'll tell you why you didn't, because you're a good person and you recognize that the people that are attacking people from South America and people from Africa and people from anywhere over the world that would find their way here do it in a way that is blanket and dismissive of their humanity. And so your reaction to it, rightly so, is to assert their humanity and judge them as a person, as a human being, right?
Yeah.
And so in the defense against the abject racism of the Republican Party over the last few decades, we have all sort of been kind of cowed into a more simple view of American history because the lines were so stark. And they don't have to be. You can still defend people's right to come here, seek a better life, seek asylum, recognize the value of democracy and its expression in the rest of the world without having to just assume, that everybody is morally equal while they may be created equal. They're not. And people change over time. The people who've come here initially, you think the Brits that came here for the tea trade were the same people as the Pilgrims? To that same point, you were talking about like the Caribbean islands, Haiti, and the like. Do people know that in the Cherokee Trail of Tears, there were slaves, black slaves, owned by the Cherokee tribe, because Native American tribes were able to keep their slaves for about 10 to 15 years, depending on which tribe they were, past the end of slavery, because they were sovereign. We didn't have a legal basis to make them release their slaves. And so some Southern slaveholders worked out these fucking business deals with local tribes, who, by the way, took other tribes as slaves, both to make babies and carry shit, that they're like, hey, hang on to my slaves for a while and I'll pay you for their work. Because, the fact that people don't know that is amazing to me. The Mohawk Indians, I real quick. So I love, I got a chance to take a picture with this guy, Jean Beauvoir, at the Kiss Cancer Goodbye thing. And I love Jean Beauvoir's music. He co-wrote some Kiss songs, and he has his own music is great. He's a black dude with a big blonde mohawk. And Doug Pinnick from King's X, who's also one of my favorite bands, black dude, mohawk, wore a mohawk. So I've been a big fan of the hairstyle for a long time. You know where the name Mohawk comes from? It's an exonym. It's a name given to you, not one that you take on. An endonym is what you call yourself. An exonym is what other people call you. We call the Chinese the Chinese. That's an exonym. They call themselves Zhongguoren, which means people of the Middle Kingdom or the center of the earth, depending on how you want to look at it, because they think the entire earth emanates from China. Zhongguo, middle country. That's the center of everything, right? That's the ego involved in Zhongguo. Not even Qinna, not even the Qin dynasty children or whatever the version where we got that name from, okay? Mohawk means flesh eater. Live, by the way, live flesh eater, not just somebody who eats meat. Because the Mohawks would sometimes eat someone in front of the other tribe. They'd capture somebody and they'd stake them up on something and they would eat the flesh from their body to scare the shit out of the other tribe. So They were called the Mohawks. That's where the fucking name comes. It wasn't the name of the haircut. It was the name of the tribe that had that haircut. And they were nuts in that regard. But it's what they needed to do, apparently, for their own survival and safety in this brutal situation they were. But that's where the name comes from. It's an exonym. It's not an endonym. Lakota Sioux. Sioux was, I believe, a Pawnee word for thief because the Pawnees' land was stolen by the Lakotas. That's the Lakota Sioux, by the way, are the tribe from Dancing with Wolves that we all think of as the prime, peaceful, sweet, just trying to get the white settlers off their land. They didn't give a fuck what color you were. If it was their land and you were on it, you're dead. How's that different from the Germans and the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the fucking Bavarians and the Romans? Jesus Christ. The Vikings that fucked their way across Scotland and made everybody redheaded. Right? That was the point. Jesus. So people, I think if anything can be learned, it's this understanding so that we're not blindsided by people's darker humanity. If you recognize it's always existed. And then you can start talking to people based on the sensible shit that we're talking about, like, this is bad for your life. These fuckers are going to institute a situation where you don't have health insurance, where you don't have Social Security. These are people are going to undermine it. And then you're like, what the fuck do I care about public school? I'm sending my kids to private school. You want everybody else to be able to read a stop sign at a fucking intersection when your kid is going to and from work? You goddamn right you want public education.
Yep.
Then we can talk on those terms.
Spot on. Yeah. And if you think that Donald Trump selected the owner of the friggin' World Wrestling Entertainment to save public education,
right?
Then you obviously need some education of some type.
That's them pulling the ladder up.
They're going to take the money. They're going to nickel and dime public education and create charter schools everywhere, and poor kids and kids with IEPs that are kids that struggle. They're going to be left behind, and it's going to be really, really sad. And literally, people aren't even paying attention, and this is the stuff that's gonna hit their children. And congratulations.
Right. And you know what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen, Major? Because you and I and the people that watch my show and that watch your show give a shit and care. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that even the people that voted poorly in this situation don't fall through the cracks. And we're going to soften the fucking blow that happens to them, because that's what it means to be a good person. That's what it means to take care of somebody. And we're, instead of next time just going, no, man, I'm sure you do the same for me. We got to start letting them know. Democrats need to start crowing from the fucking rooftops about all the things that we have done to build this country into something that's more equitable and honest and safe and caring and an example of the ideas that were put in by the founding fathers in the first fucking place. Stop letting them claim words like freedom and shit like that and cut women's rights. And that was us.
Yeah, I will tell you that right now at this point, I am like, if Jamie Harrison was a football coach, he would have been fired on election night. It's time for the Democrats to start putting people in positions that know how to fight and win these races. There's no reason, we had so many people that voted blue, down ballot candidates, and we still got daggone Donald Trump. And once again, the people that are going to be hurt the worst are the ones that were Donald Trump's biggest supporters.
That's right.
But I mean, at the end of the day, we got some rough roads ahead, man. We just got to stay in this fight, man. And brother, let me tell you something. Everybody that watches this needs to know. I mean, the guy literally just spoke Mandarin Chinese. You can't beat it, man. I mean, honestly, man, you're one of the smartest people I've ever met, Hal, and I've known you for a while now. We've done quite a few podcasts and stuff together. We were on Stutter and John many times together. Brother, let me tell you something. You are just different, brother, and I'm glad that you were on our side. I really am, man. You bring a lot to the table, brother.
I feel like it's my responsibility, but like I said, our role in the next 4 years especially will be to fearlessly defend that safety net that we put in there for the people that will fall through the cracks, whether they voted our way or not. Because, I don't think being dumb is a capital offense. And as much as I don't like some of these assholes, and it drives me nuts to even have to argue this bullshit with them. I grew up around some dumbasses in my time in Kentucky. I'm sure you've seen people that were ate up with the dumbasses, my dad would say, in your neighborhood. But that doesn't mean they deserve sickness and death. And if I have to run interference on them so that I can at least argue it with them later, I will. But I'm also not going to allow my side to bullshit us cow us into false humility and pretend we aren't of value because, the America bad crowd wants to shit all over this country and then go, but if we get rid of Social Security, what'll happen to people? Like, well, motherfucker, that's a special thing that the United States came up with. It's a good thing. And if you want to let it die, you're part of the problem.
Yep, exactly.
Thanks so much, brother. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Hey, Phil, stay safe down there, brother. I see you guys. I see you probably next week, brother.
I insist. Okay, thank you, brother. Appreciate it. And we're going to go to, if I may, let me go over to the chat room real quick as I bring in Phil and put him in his proper place. Where's this? Why is it not doing the thing? Okay, I'll just jump straight in here because I think it will work. If I pop him in here right away. Yeah. Paste. Okay, and 3, 2, 1. Should pop in right about now. A little slower than usual. Hey, it's Gandalf.
There we are.
Gandalf the Wizened. Welcome.
It's either that or it's my Peaky Blinders hat. I don't know which one you'd prefer.
I think both work, but it's gonna fuck with all my automatic pop culture references that will just leap to mind in this process. Now it's Gangs of New York. So, yeah, whatever keeps
we've been without power for over an hour now, so some of the heat has dissipated. So
yeah, it's a little chilly. It's okay.
A little chilly. Got to cover the old noggin.
Understood. And if people, insist that you yell, "You shall not pass," I'll let it slide this one time. Yeah. Okay. So lots of shit going on, but there's something that I've been wanting to talk to you about because I went on a deep dive recently on the Georgian conflict because I was it was a blank spot in my understanding of the argument about that there was a who started it conversation back in the day, which totally mirrors what we saw with Ukraine. Well, it was NATO encroachment, and you guys were promising them NATO, so we had to do something, right? And so it seems to, if I'm not mistaken, boil down to this, and I'm going to blitz on the year, but it was this August 8th versus August 7th argument. And the idea was that the Russians attacked at 11:35 on the night of August 7th, but the attack from Georgia didn't happen till the 8th. So when Russia was trying to reverse...
You're talking about the war. You're talking about the 2008 war.
Yeah. So that when it was fairly obvious, because time moves forward, that Russia attacked first and Georgia defended itself from these encroaching forces, that they went back, literally the Russians went back and rewrote news stories and changed the date of when they were doing stuff, like changed blogs and messages and all this stuff. But again, because it's 2008 and not 1988, there's a lot more evidence left over from this shit of when actually stuff started happening. And and not only did the Russians attack on the 7th and the response from the Georgians happened on the 8th, but they're like, I found intelligence communiques that were publicly available that talked about how like Russian intel was doing sabotage attacks in July of that year, and that they had done like a 3-year lead up planning on this 2008 attack when they did it, and it was just a matter of like, when are we going to pull the ripcord on this thing and get it started? And July of 2008 was when it was.
Let me try and clear some of that up with you.
Yeah.
And by the way, in your deep dive on what is happening now, I hope you included my interview with Marika.
Yes, we'll get to that in a minute.
Who is currently, who I worry about every day. She's on the streets. Bless her heart. She was kind enough to come on the show, but she was talking about the current conflict. I was in Georgia in 2008. I was sent there by CBS News,
right,
to cover that war. Mainly because I had actually been paying attention to it for years. And you're right. Every year, the Russians, using their proxies in Abkhazia or Ossetia, these kind of breakaway republics that are propped up by Moscow in the Caucasus to be spoilers within Georgia. Every year they would try and provoke Tbilisi. So they would make an incursion into this place or that place. And in 2008, what happened was, and they did it for, you're right, it was about 3 years they did this in a row. And it gets kind of controversial because it does go into murkiness, and it does go into, well, what's the real truth, because the Russians are so good at manipulating narratives. But my belief is, and I'm not the only one who shares this, is that what happened was they sent an armed force headed towards a town called Gori, which, little historical note, was where Stalin was born. Anyhow, it's this little town in the Caucasus Mountains, and they made a push. And Mikhail Saakashvili, who was president at the time, who was educated in the West and was very pro-Western, and who sadly is currently rotting away in a Georgian prison at the behest of Moscow. I've met Misha several times, and actually I consider, if not a friend, then I have a good relationship with him. So it's terrible to see him rotting away in prison. Anyhow, Mikhail Saakashvili took the bait, and he sent Georgian troops to attack the Abkhazians who had made this incursion. Or they were Russian soldiers. Still, question.
Right.
So Moscow then says, oh my God, they're killing these poor little Abkhazians. We must protect them. Now here's the thing, Hal, and here's why I am convinced that this was absolutely 100%. In fact, I don't even think it. I am convinced of it. There is one tunnel. The Caucasus is a very mountainous area, and the Soviets built a tunnel called the Roki Tunnel, and it goes through the Caucasus Mountains from Dagestan, which is I think it's Dagestan. Anyhow, mainland Russia, and it's a single tunnel. And so they just, when this Abkhazian incursion into Georgian territory that Saakashvili responded to, sparked a response from Moscow. Well, they just happened to have 3 battalions sitting on the other edge of this tunnel that could just come streaming into Georgia in 2008. It's just, they just happened to be there on exercises, so they were able to storm through this single entry point into Georgia. It was clearly manipulated. It was clearly almost exact same technique that they used to provoke the full-scale invasion here in Ukraine. This poor ethnic group that is connected to us and wants to be friends with Moscow is being attacked by the big bad meanies who are supported by NATO. So we have no choice but to go and invade. So that's what happened in 2008.
Right.
I was an eyewitness to that war. That war could have gone very differently. I have it on good authority that, whatever you think about George Bush, called Putin and said, no, stop this. Don't, you cannot do it. And he must have done it with a much more forceful intent than, say, Obama did during Crimea and Donbass. I mean, I drove over the last bridge
Yeah.
into the Capitol. I drove over that bridge, and I clearly remember, and I have friends and colleagues who were with me at the time. The Georgians were so convinced that they were going to make a march on the Capitol. They had sappers, they had engineers. Which I should have mentioned this while the major was still here. They had engineers on the bridge in 2008 ready to blow it, to stop tanks going into the Capitol. The Georgians were convinced that this was it, that the Russians were really going to, and they may not have been wrong. They had the capacity.
If Bush had not, enforced this idea and made them pull the plug, with whatever he said or whatever he gave them, that could be the other thing too. He may have, said better this than that. Could have been steak.
Don't know.
Yep. We don't know. Right. And maybe that's
now. Before we move on.
Yeah.
So the status quo that got left after 2008 was that Abkhazia and Ossetia were now kind of protectorates of Moscow, and it just kind of, there was this limbo. They weren't internationally recognized, but Moscow recognized them, and a couple of places like Burkina Faso or maybe Syria did. We'll talk about that a little bit. They recognized the independence of Abkhazia and Ossetia. So it sat there from 2008 until basically now, and they got rid of Saakashvili. They installed an oligarch. This is Moscow. Moscow installed an oligarch who made his money in Moscow in this post-Soviet sphere, and he has become the de facto potentate, the governor of Georgia, exerting Russian will. Right. And so now let's jump forward to the current period, because you go from 2008 to basically, the last year and a half, 2 years, when Georgians, because Ivanishvili has had his proxies in there, which means a proxy for Moscow, and they started coming out with these Moscow laws that were very similar to what Moscow has put in the Russian Federation, controls on any kind of trade with the West, an abandonment of any aspiration to join the EU or a trading partner, in the West, and certainly not NATO. And the Georgian people have mostly young, mostly urban, have said no. And so now that's why we see these street battles.
Right.
And I'm trying to get somebody on to talk to me about it, but in my efforts to do that, I spoke with a friend of mine, a former ABC producer who lived there. He fell in love with Georgia and he lived there. Now he's left and he's gone back to Paris because things are too unstable and he's concerned for the safety of his family. But I got onto a long phone conversation with him, and we will have to wait and see. But in a country of 4.7 million people, which is roughly what it is, it's my understanding, it's around that ballpark number. You have hundreds of thousands of people on the streets. It takes a lot to motivate people to take to action. Takes a lot to even get them to get out and cast a ballot, as easy as that can be. To have 13 nights now, I believe this is our 13th night, where there are hundreds of thousands of Georgians on the street, and people are coming in and feeding them. They're coming in from the rural areas and feeding them. They're in trouble.
Yeah,
they're in big trouble. The Moscovites and the proxies there. Having said that, my friend in Paris made a very good point in that Georgia it's a lovely country, and it is beautiful, and the people are friendly, and the cuisine is wonderful. I can't rave about it enough.
Right.
But there's a distinct divide between age groups. There's a distinct divide between urban and rural. It is a very traditional country. very traditional. And if you suddenly had LGBTQ, pride parades down the streets of some of these towns, it would freak them the hell out. And Moscow knows that. So Moscow is cynically using it. They don't even really care. They're just using it as well. And it has had traction in the countryside where we don't want to be like that. We don't want, we go to church every Sunday. We're very provincial people. We're not highly educated. And the population is split. I don't know if it's 50-50 or if there are, he made the argument there were more in the rural villages. And that if push comes to shove, they would more likely
side with Russia because of the progressive ideas of conservatives.
They're also a relatively remote country.
Yeah.
So all the infrastructure is built north, heading into Russia. They get their water, they get trade. That's how trade routes are. That's how they get electricity in many ways. So they're gonna have to live with the Russians. The Georgians are just, by sheer factor of geography and size and location, it's not like they're not like the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians can break free and become part of Europe. Georgia is going to have a harder time breaking away from Russia. So they're going to have to be more pragmatic, perhaps, than the Ukrainians have to be. But nevertheless, I mean, again, check out the episode I did with Marika. The young people are determined to get away from this regressive, abusive relationship that they have with Russia, by hook or by crook. And so that's why we're seeing these massive street battles. And I am afraid, like Maidan, however, one last point.
Sure.
I am afraid that, like Maidan, because the government, the parliament, which is now completely run by the Moscow proxies, are starting to pass these laws of like, you cannot come out on the streets in a mask. Unless you properly go through administration, you can't go on the streets. They're setting laws up like they did in Maidan in 2014 here in Ukraine to give them the excuse to use extreme violence against the street protesters. We'll have to see how it goes. But I'm afraid for my friends who are in Georgia, and I worry that, like Maidan, that we might see blood before we see hopefully Ivanishvili and his cohorts will pack up their worldly goods and as much money as they squirreled away and leave. But there's also the very distinct possibility this could get bloody before it ends.
Right. I mean, it has been bloody for quite some time in Georgia, just on the periphery as opposed to straight through the capital itself. And again, there's a distinct difference between the sort of salami slicing blood that Russia gets out of a lot of places versus the kind of surgical strikes and the overt attacks that they do when they go for the gold, as it were, in a particular country and try to take it over. So there's always that issue, I think. They're grabbing people off the street and beating the crap out of them. Right.
There have not been what I am saying, and I hope that I'm not right.
Yeah.
What I am afraid of is the weapons come out, and it's not just grabbing one protest leader or a journalist and beating the crap out of them and hoping that intimidates everybody else, but instead they roll out a bunch of APCs and they start blasting away. I mean, they've already done terrible things like putting, in essence, tear gas in the water cannons mixed with the water so that it disperses even more. I mean, it's these poor people who are on the streets. God bless them; they're brave people.
Yeah.
But that's a far cry from
what they're capable
rolling
of.
out. Yeah, what they're capable of.
Here's the thing, though, and again, I completely agree. This is kind of like everybody's worst feelings about Trump going for everything he can possibly grab, and it's not it's not like we're not aware of that possibility, but to fret about it ahead of time means to exclude all the other reasons why they haven't done it so far and why they won't do it going forward. And a big part of it is, especially in Georgia, is that opening up another front towards a capital where you're obviously pulling a Ukraine in Georgia with this move would absolutely change the entire dynamic, even for Trump and his crowd, because it would be seen as opening up a new front that's not going to close anytime soon. They're not going to be able to solve it in 6 days like they wanted to with Ukraine. If they open up this can of worms, it stays open for quite some time. And this idea that Trump is going to be this peacekeeper goes right in the fucking toilet. Now, do they do it right after he sworn in and it's too late and it doesn't fucking matter and he lets stuff slide? Is that a concern? Absolutely. I think that's the bigger worry, is that they wait until he's sworn in because they know he'll slow roll a response. The problem is that, again, senators are going to be there long after he's gone, that there are House members who need to get reelected and in 18 months. After they've sworn in, they've got to start raising money and then go start their campaign again in less than a year. So, or they're always campaigning, depending on it. And if you're like, well, I thought he was going to solve this, they're going to hear from the maggots, I thought he was going to solve Ukraine in 24 hours right after, and that's still going on. And now Georgia's happening. I don't think Putin listens to him at all. I think this is bullshit. And then maybe they don't vote for the other side, but they just don't show up. And they were crucial to his victory on a very small margin. So that's,
look, it will be bloody. There are more Georgians that who are against this Moscow proxy political party called Georgian Dream. That's Ivanishvili's little kind of puppet group. Right. They could overthrow them easily. There's right. No question, but they could overthrow them. But it would mean a lot of blood. Now, there's also one of the other things that Georgia has going for them is that it has a kind of a lightning rod. One of the problems that the opposition in Georgia has is that they're too disparate, too many different groups, and that's done both on purpose right. And both because, God bless them. Again, I love the Georgians, but there's the old saying of you put two Georgians in a room and you'll have 3 arguments. Mm-hmm. They are very fractious people. Sure. But if they could unify around a single person and the president of the country, and the president is more of has certain powers, but it's really the prime minister. It's a parliamentary system. So mm-hmm. The prime minister has more power than the president, but the president has been really good about standing up mm-hmm. to the Moscow proxies. And just what was it last week when they were in Notre Dame? She was in Notre Dame, and there are those shots of her going up to Trump and them having what appeared to be a very pleasant exchange, a very mm-hmm. cordial exchange. Now, it doesn't matter because Trump, at the end of the day, is transactional. If it's in his best interest, sure. He'll chuck her out of the bus. But she is a good lightning rod for the Georgian opposition if push comes to shove. Also, in addition, it needs to be mentioned that, and this is a bittersweet point to be made, but it's a point that does need to be made, is that the Europeans are stepping up because they're like, we can't trust this Trump guy. The right. Americans are no longer the Americans are no longer a reliable partner. Mm-hmm. So we may have to be the ones that step up and support Georgian opposition. And they are. They've been very vocal. A lot of European countries are putting sanctions on the ruling class, the Moscow proxies in Georgia. Right. They're making really loud overtures that, we will full on support. And I say it's bittersweet because we should be doing this together. America, the Western Alliance should be doing this together. But already the Europeans are starting to look at this and say, we better have a battle plan if things kick off in Georgia to support the Georgian opposition, because we cannot trust the Americans. And I'm sure there's intelligence gathering that's going on right now in Georgia and probably in Russia, around the region. And I wonder if that's being shared right now with America. I mean, it's.
Oh, for sure it is.
We'll see what
Here's
happens,
the thing.
but it's
yeah,
sad
Trump's
to see
people,
that we're not unified.
Yeah, no. Even though Trump is nominating people like Tulsi Gabbard for shit, they have not signed their loyalty pledges yet, so they don't get briefings until they do, and because they haven't officially taken an oath of any sort, and that oath is violable. You can violate it. You can go to jail for breaking your oath once you take it, and that means that even though we always have to worry that people at the top of these organizations could get away with slipping information to the other side or playing footsie with these, it's still a crime. Even if the president seems to okay it, that doesn't matter. You can't make treason legal just because you're president. He takes an oath as well to faithfully execute, and he can violate that oath as well. So again, the fact that Merrick Garland, blah blah blah, we act on is one thing, but it means something. And currently, they have not. His DNA, like Grinnell, probably still knows people from his time in there, and probably is getting a whisper conversation. But Gabbard isn't, insofar as we know. Not that she's going to pass anything along. And Assad's deposed, and Putin's not taking phone calls right now, anyways. So what's she going to fucking tell him? We don't like him, or it'll be okay. It's just a bunch of bullshit. That said, I do want to point something out.
Our ties also do go way back. I mean, like Georgian.
Yes.
Not many people that know this, but like Georgian, I think it was by percentage of population, was the third largest member of the alliance in Iraq. They sent more soldiers than it was the Americans, the Brits, and then like the Georgians at one point at least. We have a long history with the Georgians. We train them. We have intelligence ties with them. My concern is that there may be Georgians and Europeans who also have ties inside Georgia going. We're going to have to keep our cards a little bit closer to our chest this time. So I don't know. We shall see. We shall see.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
My heart is with those people on the street every night.
Yeah, and I also think that we ran into a similar thing with the cruel and ridiculous adventurism of shock and awe in Iraq and Afghanistan. So there was a lot of Europeans saying the exact same thing on a much more direct scale about that. I mean, we all remember freedom fries and our relationship with France and the Europeans around that. Some joining us, some not. Some being in Afghanistan but not Iraq, and not trusting us after fucking the yellow cake bullshit. With Colin Powell. So there's a lot to this that I think is not that strange. That said, I wanted to bring up something that I thought was fascinating, because there are a lot of firsts that are occurring in the Ukraine war of liberation from Russia. And one of them, let's see if I can bring this in here. You might be Tara for a split second. Nope, where he is.
Oh yeah,
okay.
These.
Sorry, I'll bring it in here. Yeah. Let me copy this and pop you in here so you can see. Yeah.
That is the good old Ma Deuce, otherwise known as the M2 Browning machine gun, a 50 caliber machine gun that's been in military service for damn near a century.
Yep.
And is a kick-ass weapon.
Well, it's been mounted.
Me a Ma Deuce.
Right. Well, let me show you this. It has been mounted on a ground drone, and this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first time I've ever heard the word used. This is the first droid deployed in warfare. It is a battle droid. This is the first actual official battle droid deployed in history. Welcome to 2024/2025. But look at the game controller that he is using. This is and the Ukrainians have used these things. There is a video, and I want to find it if I can. That shows the number of regular drones for dropping grenades and for reconnaissance and for just flying cheap drones into expensive drones that the Russians have and downing them, because you you can fuck up a regular drone just by banging into it. You can send it into a spiral. You can if your thing is faster than it, it can land on the wing and wreck it. And that's what they tend to do with a lot of these cheaper drones. And there was I want to find the image of it, but it was I saw it yesterday. It was friggin' incredible, just the stacking of these things. They're just 3D printing parts and using servos that they're buying and just printing them. And they were,
the Ukrainians are starting to develop a domestic military production line that is, there you go. That's right.
These are all 3D printed parts, and then they just get Arduino boards or the Raspberry Pi that I was showing on my show Zero, which is very small, which you can program to do a shit ton of things, including have an AI camera on it that spots adult males versus females and that kind of stuff, and will attack only people who have insignia or whatever, and will chase them down once it has that, which is terrifying in and of itself. But they are cranking these things out. Look at that. That's just rows and rows and rows, and they all stack. They all just and they put these things on them. And even with a down ratio of 20%, 80% of these things are getting through. It's just extraordinary. And
there has been
cheap.
There has been.
Whoops, sorry.
There's been no, that's okay.
There you go.
Oh, there I am. I have heard a lot of talk of if the transatlantic rift really does get bad, Ukraine is well suited to be the arms manufacturer for Europe.
Yep.
They could, if the Europeans transition from NATO to a European security force, Ukraine is getting to the point, not only in the terms of how well trained their military is and battle hardened, but also their military industrial complex, which I know when people hear that and they get spooked, but you got to have a military, especially when you have a belligerent partner or a belligerent neighbor next door like Russia.
Yeah, ask
and
Finland
they are
and
stepping
Sweden.
it up. Now, they're not going to surpass the Germans anytime soon, or the Brits or the French or the Belgians, But they are, and they're inventive, like these drones we're seeing. That mechanized thing with the M2 on it, the Browning heavy machine gun. If I were a Russian soldier, that would strike terror into because short of the Bushmaster, which is what we put on our M2 Bradleys, the 50 caliber lays down fire I've been in action. Yeah. I've been in combat with M2s,
it will cut trees. It will cut trees through the trunk.
Yeah,
it's shocking and frightening how it is.
Yeah. It is in the truest sense of the word, and not to be like a positive, but it is awe-inspiring. It is terrifying and awe-inspiring.
Right.
So the Ukrainians are getting to a point, and I don't know, who knows when that point will be, but they could easily become the arms manufacturer for an independent European security force that does not rely, nor does it have interdependence with the North Atlantic Treaty Association, organization. So we're getting into really, really weird stuff. There's there's the body count, which obviously is something we always talk about.
Right.
But this is astounding for them. They've just lost Syria.
Yeah, we'll get it. I want to talk about that next because I know you've spent time in that part of the world.
There's a whole.
And some of that is just
a whole thing
holy shit.
If you want to talk about if you want to talk about the casualties before we move on to Syria, because Syria is going to take the rest of the hour.
Yes,
easily. It's that huge. This is an enormous development. But looking at the casualty rate, we will before I will make a cautious prediction, and I've learned my lesson. I've burnt my fingers too many times with predictions, so I'm going to be cautious with this one. But I wouldn't be terribly surprised if we cross the 1 million casualty mark before January 20th, before the inauguration.
Agreed.
You know, and that's gonna factor in.
Yes.
So, and they're losing and they're losing and they're losing, and there comes a point when the Russians, because of course Russians are famously capable of suffering. They have a huge capacity for suffering in terms of casualties. But it does get to a point where it's like, I will, and we've talked about this, generally painting with a very large brush, Russians will say, I am willing to pay this sacrifice. We will send our young men to die for empire. If the great Russian state is emboldened by this military adventurism, and we regain territory and we regain prestige, and the world is afraid of us again, we are willing to make these sacrifices. But what is happening is that they are losing and losing and losing all these men and assets and all the rest of it. They're not gaining anything.
Right.
Their position since this began, and by that I mean the full-scale invasion, not 2014. I mean, things get really hanky. They're repeatedly losing stuff. They're not gaining stuff. People who are pro-Russian, the Vatniks, they call them, or the whatever.
The tankies,
the tankies, the self-loathing Americans and Westerners who would like to see Russia in the ascendant. They point to this. Oh, but look at the approaches. Look at the land that they're grabbing out in Donbass.
Right.
Well, okay, they've grabbed approximately territory the size of London. I mean, it's not a massive land grab, and for what? Not for a lot.
Nope.
And also, in about 2 weeks' time, and maybe not even 2 weeks' time, but maybe even sooner, the ground will be frozen.
Yeah.
So any advances that the Russians will be able to make, unless they take over Ukrainian defensive positions and then reposition them to turn them around to face the Ukrainians, they will not be able to dig their own fortifications. Nope. So any ground that the Russians continue to take through the winter, they will have to either use makeshift defenses or appropriate Ukrainian defenses, which again which are not ideal.
Because the Ukrainians have it mapped and they know the weakness.
Position.
They know where it is and they know the weakness of it. So they know exactly. It's like, we'll build a fort, you run inside it, and then we set the thing on fire. Right.
You could sabotage it. You could use the intelligence of knowing, because you built it yourself, where to hit. Yeah, no, look, the Russians, when they advance, if they indeed do advance in the winter, they will not be able, they're going to have a real hard time holding that territory, because they will not be able to build defensive positions. And one quick aside note before we start talking about Syria. You remember when I said that a little candle, just one little candle, can warm up a room?
Yeah.
Boom. Boom. That's it. You think Russia? You think you're gonna deprive us of electricity and heat?
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm all right. I got this little candle. I'm not exactly comfy, but it'll do.
Beats the alternative.
Considering the alternative is subjugation to an imperial power, which will screw with us for centuries. So, yeah. Anyhow, you want to talk about Syria now?
Boy, do I. So, first of all, let's start with the fact that that Syria, Assad fled to Russia. Let's just start there. That in and of itself is just like, it's so fucking on the nose. It's so, there's going to be like this.
Sovereign.
Yeah, exactly. This Vatnik, like Mount Rushmore of him and Snowden and Yanukovych and whoever the fuck else, who was always on Team Russia, and at one point shit got so bad they had to stop pretending and bug off home. And the fact that like Assad had built he and his family had bought a row of these big like super mansions or condo-y kind of buildings that he was with, and his whole family like was, I don't know if they're vacationing there or whatever is the idea, but they're all just moving in. Like, it's obvious that they were like, okay, even if we let somebody else take over this dump, we're never going to be able to stay in after, even if we hand it off to a relative, we're not going to be able to stay in Syria. So we're going to need someplace to go. Where did they decide to go? They bought homes in Moscow. That's where.
Mm-hmm.
So
and also speaking about Ukrainians and their inventive drone program, I find it interesting that there were Ukrainian drone operators working in Syria to overthrow Assad.
Indeed. Well, again, because the Wagner and Russia are there to support them. And if you can drive the Russians out of that place, if you can show how weak they are, it weakens them on the world stage as well. And they have, Russia was backing the Assad regime. They were backing the Syrian military. And they are, I want to say, and I'll look at the current update or whatever, but the Russians still have a couple of bases in Syria. By the way, 2 of which used to be ours before Trump gave them to them when we bugged out and left the Kurds to be slaughtered by the Turks. Right? And so they, they're encroaching there's a myriad of groups from ISIS to these leftover rebel groups that are encroaching on what's left of the Russians. There was reports that Assad's plane had been shot down. Turns out it was just one of the Russian evacuation planes. He wasn't on it. Apparently he made it. But there were probably a bunch of Russian support and soldiers and other people that were on it that got killed. And then we've hit ISIS camps in central Syria that were effectively acting as a buffer zone funded by Russia to, so that they wouldn't have to waste arms and people fighting the rebels, the Syrian Democratic Forces. Just let ISIS do it, right? And they just fund them to do it. And we just, once the Syrian army was out of the way, or the Russians had cleared out or whatever it was, U.S. CENTCOM just fucking wiped out these ISIS camps. Whole cloth, gone. Yeah.
I was there. I was there in 2017, 2018, something like that. Where there were, we had a huge amount of boots on the ground.
When Tulsi Gabbard came to visit, coincidence? I think not. But
so I spent some time with the SDF guys and some time with the Kurds, who are good allies, good fighters, not radicals. But there are absolutely elements within Syria that we're going to have to keep an eye on. But when we talk about what this means for Russia, because there's a number of things that this and I have no doubt was calculated by the Ukrainians when they were thinking about things, is so the naval base there is, again, something we've discussed, but I'll just do a quick a synopsis. Russia has 4 fleets, 4 and a half, okay? And they've always aspired to have a warm water port because a lot of their ports are either, they get frozen in, or they are boxed in by other partners, other nation state, power states, and only gotten worse since Finland has joined the NATO alliance. So that Putin keeps losing his naval assets. Right. And they have a naval asset. They have a base on the Mediterranean in Syria called Tartus. And to my knowledge, the last I checked, it hadn't officially fallen, but they bugged out their ships. The Russians had,
Yeah.
and it looks pretty imminent that they're going to. I mean, the Assad remnants. There might be the infighting that happens and all the rest of it, but I do not think that they are going to get Tartus back. So that is another naval embarrassment.
Right.
And Russia takes its naval power very seriously. So that's another naval loss.
Yeah, and where do these ships go? It's not like they're going to make their way back.
They're just hanging out.
Yeah, they're just loitering in the fucking water.
They're just loitering in the Med, in international waters in the Med. They cannot get back. They can't get back to, well, they could conceivably get to
go all the way around and go up to the Arctic Circle.
All the way around back and get to Murmansk, where the Russia's northern fleet is located. They could try and get back. Oh, not try. They could go to where the Baltic fleet is located. But either of those locations are no longer good for them, because once they're in, they're boxed in.
Yeah.
Because if things get really bad with NATO, NATO's just going to shut off all the waterways. So both their Baltic and their northern seas are no longer a viable safe haven for this contingent of, and of course they can't come to the Black Sea either.
Right.
They can't come to the Black Sea because Ukraine will hit them with naval drones. I mean, they're just the only viable naval port that Russia has working is Vladivostok out on their Pacific fleet. Yeah. And that is very difficult to sustain. Yeah. It's very difficult to sustain by water now because of the situation, and it's very hard to sustain by land because of the massive land mass and the fact that it's getting to the time of year where it's very difficult to get stuff from Western Russia, from European Russia, all the way out to the Pacific. I mean, this is disastrous for Putin. It is absolutely disastrous. And there's one more element to this, aside from the military situation, the political situation, is this. Syria, if it gets its shit together and does stabilize, and the international community helps it to stabilize, there ain't nothing between the oil fields of Saudi Arabia, through Jordan, through Syria, through Turkey, and Russia's little narcotic, pusher line with the fossil fuels that it used to dangle over Europe is no longer a thing. Right. Okay. Oh, they can build a pipeline all the way from the oil fields of Saudi Arabia all the way up into Europe, and screw you. Nord Stream 2, who the fuck needs it? Screw you. We don't need it. All the oil barrels that you rip out of middle and eastern Siberia that you take great expense at sending to Europe. No, don't need it.
They can do
Saudi Arabia.
They could set up a pipeline that where they're like ROI is like $30 a barrel or something. They're whereas Russia's is minimum $55 a barrel no matter what they do, and this is before all their systems started collapsing. Can I also show something real quick? And I do want to address the OPEC thing. So remind me about Russia and Saudi Arabia and their tacit alliance over oil. Remember all the wailing and gnashing of teeth about we left Afghanistan. It was the most embarrassing thing that's ever fucking happened. Okay, so I would argue that that Syria is Russia's Afghanistan on steroids, to borrow the phrase, and that it's fucking way worse because we set a date to go, and the date was ugly, but we're not coming back. The Russians have been forced to flee. And I would like to show you something, if I may. This is a missile that has been seized by the rebels. That is a Russian missile. That is a Russian radar battery system. This is one of the bases of the Syrian army that is basically completely funded or filled with Russian gear. If you don't talk about the best equipment, we gave them the trucks, they took everything, the airplane, brand new, everything, whatever. Okay, that's what's happened here. That's what's actually happened here. Like, I mean, obviously this missile looks like shit, but it's
as opposed
comparatively
to Afghanistan,
yes,
and as opposed to Afghanistan, what's aside for our wounded pride or whatever the hell, doesn't really have any strategic importance for the United States of America.
We don't give a shit, right? Sorry,
losing Syria for the Russians, that is devastating for them, you know, in their strategic posture.
That's right.
Globally. That's, you know, we lost Afghanistan, and we go,
right.
A bunch of guys living in the mountains making opium.
Yeah, we'll deal with it when it comes this way. Right.
Yeah, when you know, when all the heroin starts flowing out of Afghanistan again into the European market, we'll deal with it. But for the Russians to lose Syria, loses access to the Med, loses you know, all the influence that it had.
And they can't cock block oil coming from Saudi Arabia, like you were talking about, which is the whole fucking point. I mean, literally, there's a point, and this is why, like, I don't believe Russia supports Trump and his ideas. I think they just view him as a chaos agent, and he can fuck with America and slow our roll, and maybe they can gain some ground in that time. At this point, though, we're their only hope for a future. If like most of their oligarchs only exist because the U.S. dollar remains relatively strong, there's not going to be a BRICS anything, and they know it. So that's another conversation. And the proof is in. So Donald Trump has been talking about how he's going to cut energy costs next year by 50%. He's going to cut your energy costs by 50% because we're going to drill, baby drill. Okay, first of all, unless you only carrot and stick, you can either regulate or force or pay oil companies to produce more. That's the only way we can do it in a free market system the way we have. Russia can manipulate their market. So can Saudi Arabia. One's a dictatorship. The other's a royal family that controls everything. Meanwhile, OPEC makes the deepest cut yet to the 2024 world oil demand forecast. They were going to cut production anyways. They have lowered it even more. They were going to cut by 1 million barrels. They're going to cut by 1.6 million barrels because the demand is going in the shitter. Two reasons: the electrification of consumer vehicles in Europe and the United States and Canada, primarily. And the second one, of course, being the demise of the Chinese economy and the use of oil and gas in theirs. Right, there you go. Yeah. Yeah.
This is my battery.
That's right.
I run my household off this battery.
Right.
You know?
And it's
now I'm on minimal electrical usage, but we're getting better at it.
Right. So this is the 5th reduction so far. They are Alliance agreed last week to delay, slow the revivals in its output. So not only they were planning on turning the spigot back on to try and get back up to like pre-COVID levels. They said, nah, we were going to do that in February. We're probably going to do it, I think, in April is what they ended up saying. OPEC chopped projections for consumption growth in 2024 by 210,000 barrels to 1.6 million barrels a day, according to its monthly report. Cartel has slashed projections by 27% since July. Their projections for how much oil will be consumed have gone down by over a quarter since July, as it belatedly recognizes, and that's adorable, the deteriorating market picture. This is Bloomberg, so you have to forgive them. They're kind of Wall Street languaging. Yes. Last week, OPEC, alliance led by Saudi Arabia and Russia, agreed for a third time to delay plans to restart halted crude production while also slowing the pace of increases once they do begin next year, which they aren't going to begin next year because they keep punting them. I love this. Is like they're going to slow the pace of increases once they do begin. Who the fuck says they will? Why? All this Russian oil has effectively been off the table And it hasn't affected oil prices. I mean, like gas went up in the States like to about $5 and then receded because it was all backfilled by all these other countries that were waiting for their seat at the table. And once Russia moved out of the way, they're like, oh, we got oil. How about we sell it? And that was that. Canada turned out more. We turned out more. And, increasingly, the switch to renewables is also outpacing projections. Amazon is going to start selling like Hyundai cars mainly because, and this is the part like, fuck me. So people don't recognize this. One of the things about car dealerships for the longest time, why gas and petroleum based cars and combustion engines, why it was such a bitch to have a car dealership and why there weren't things like Carvana and that kind of stuff was the regulations about parking a bunch of vehicles with tanks full of gas have remnant, rules from the 1950s and the 1940s, and so this mixture of hybrids lowering the amount of gas that a car might have if you can test drive it. So they basically only keep a gallon in it, and the oil being sealed inside the block so that you don't ever have it's synthetic even. So it, might not even burn at all. I don't know what the burn rate on synthetic oil is as a lubricant is, probably about the same as trying to set fire to Vaseline, which I don't recommend. It can really ruin date night. But but the point being is that now that you have electric cars, but in large part, or hybrids in these situations, you can sell them online without needing a dealership or in a fucking mall. You can park a Tesla inside because you don't have to empty the tank to make sure that somebody can't put a rag in the tank and blow it up and all that shit. Because it's electric, it's like selling laptops. It's the same basic regulatory rules. And so it's changed everything about the marketplace for this stuff. And in our society of quick and easy and want it sooner and ego marketing that goes to you can have it exactly the color you want of us, on a spectrum of 1,000 colors as opposed to 3 and that kind of stuff. As that becomes the prevailing way you sell a vehicle, there's no going back. It doesn't stink. You can charge it from home. You can have solar panels that charge your car. You couldn't make gasoline even if you had an oil rig in your backyard anyways, but you can fuel your car with solar panels, at your home. And there's never been a more off-grid thing. Again, maggots and trolls in our chat room. The tankies are too far gone, but the maggots and trolls, I'm here to tell you, renewables are your key to off-grid, avoidance of big petroleum, right? I don't understand why the fuck you guys are interested in being on the grid and attached to a power grid at all. You want renewables to take off. You want solar panels to become, your peak way of gaining energy for your house and other shit, because no one can take it away. So this is, and again, oil's gonna fucking collapse. They know it. That's why Saudi Arabia is trying to turn itself into a fucking mall. It's trying to turn it into a tourist destination. What do you think the line is about? Jesus Christ. And they're like, what do we do when no one wants oil anymore? Go back to selling rugs and dates and behaving like civilized people? Fuck that. We've got Mecca and Medina. At least the Arabs, that are Muslim have to come and visit us. They have to come here at least twice a year. If we get them to stick around like it's Disneyland, we can charge them. That's really what they're doing. They have a mandatory vacation site in their country. That's all they give a fuck about. And Iran knows it. Iran's going to be in the same fucking position. This whole in Syria, and maybe, I tried to explain the other day, Phil, and maybe, we're at the end of the show, and I want to remind everybody, On the Edge is Phil's show. Please check it out, especially the most recent episode, because, like I said, he goes.
Did you like that one with Constantine?
Yes.
Yeah, Constantine was great.
Yeah, and there's a crucial level of detail you're not going to get anywhere else. And I appreciate the depth of conversation Phil is able to have with his guests is extraordinary. So just saying, subscribe.
If all goes according to plan, and I don't like to jinx things because we do have this electrical situation, I'm hoping that next week's episode will be with a incredibly articulate and intelligent young woman from Kharkiv. So we'll hear from the city of Kharkiv. Which I've been wanting to talk to somebody from that town for a long time. So if it all goes well, we'll have her on. She just gave a massive dressing down to Piers Morgan. So I was like, that's somebody I want on my show.
Yes. Oh, her. Yeah, she was great. She was on with
Did
that
you see
fucking
that?
Horton prick, the guy who wrote the book Provoked or whatever the shit is. Like,
And she tore him a new asshole.
yeah,
She tore him a new asshole. It was
that
beautiful.
Dude. I would love to have that guy on my show just so I could, never mind. But he all he does, all that guy does, and it's a very Vatnik tanky thing to do, is you go like on this Easter egg hunt for the most cowardly statements that anybody has ever made about the fear of Russia retaliation or whatever, and then you just list them all, and they're myriad because you can find somebody in almost every country, in the West that said, well, we got to watch out because if we do this, it's going to make Russia do this, and so he takes all of those, lists them as if they're fucking gospel, and then says it's the West's fault for making Russia attack Ukraine. Like, get the fuck out of here. It's this short skirt bullshit, and it's maddening.
If Ukraine wasn't wearing that short skirt, Russia wouldn't have. Yeah. No, but she tore him a new one, and hopefully I will have her on as my guest next week, because I'd like to talk to her about that.
Yes.
What it is to combat that kind of mentality, but also I want to check in with Harkeep because it's a city that
her father was killed by the Russians. Like her father was killed by the Russians. Like she's got more in this than anybody on that fucking panel. It was just a goddamn cartoon.
Piers Morgan.
But anyhow. Again, I think I gotta say, he was talking to Wes Clark. And Clark got to get some fucking shots in. I love Wesley Clark. I was, well before Hillary came on the scene. He was, the guy I was backing to run for president post Obama Biden when he was starting up, and he was deferential to the first woman running, and I think that was good of him as a human being. But goddamn, he's smart and caring and no bullshit. And we'd be lucky to have him in a future administration where people actually give a shit. That's another thing for another time. And he speaks in a he doesn't have any blinders on about proxy wars and bullshit like that, but he's also he doesn't give Russia a fucking inch because they will take a mile. So anyways, good luck talking to her. I look forward to tell her I send my salutes and kudos to her as well.
I will. I certainly will.
Yeah.
But anyhow, look, it just as a quick synopsis before we close off, we're winning.
Yes.
The West is winning. The West is definitively winning.
Syria, Georgia, even Ukraine. Yeah.
Syria, Jordan, yes, even in Ukraine, despite all the difficulties, Georgia, obviously, if we just don't lose our nerve, and if the Tasmanian devil that's about to be in the Oval doesn't fuck everything up, which he won't. I don't think he has the capacity to do. We're going to win. We're going to win this war. I don't know when and how and where, but losing Syria, losing Georgia, not being able to make grounds in Ukraine, the Europeans waking up to the very real danger and the fact that they may have to face it without America. All of these things Putin is in, I know I've said it before, and I don't know what a timetable it's going to be, but he's done. No Russian leader survives this. This has been so devastating.
There's no backfill for it. Again, in showing that OPEC drop in demand, real quick before you go, this is their oil demand projections. This is what's going on. What else does Russia make or produce for the world? What else? What else that's crucial? Nothing. Even their weapons are shit compared to what Ukraine will be able to kick out after this is over. So even if people need defensive weapons in the future, they're not going to turn to Russia. Well, shit, we got to buy them from somewhere, and Russia makes a lot of them or whatever. With what? With oil money? Goodbye. So again, They've dug themselves into a hole at the worst demographic time and the worst material time for them economically that they possibly could. It was their last shot, so it's understandable that he would, that he didn't have a chance to, but to fuck around. But he's definitely going to find out.
He could have done it smarter. He could have done it with oligarchs and, send in what's, soft power, although Russians don't do soft power. They do corruption
Anymore.
and influence.
Right.
Yeah. He could have done it that way. He didn't. He thought he really thought he could do this, and it's gonna be devastating for Russia. So, I am confident that we are on the road to defeating one of the worst regimes on the planet.
Yep.
And I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't exactly know how it's going to happen. I fear that more Ukrainians are going to have to die. I fear more Georgians. Well, not more Georgians. Well, yes, more Georgians because of 2008. But there's more blood to be shed unless, it is going to happen inevitably. The amount of blood that needs to be shed depends on how much we stick with the resolve and how much we deter Putin's puppet in the Oval from fucking things up. So
agreed.
If we want to win this war, it's well within our reach. Well within our reach.
Agreed. Thanks so much for being on. Look forward to the next episode of On the Edge. People should follow you. You're on Blue Sky now and Threads.
I am.
Follow
I
Philip
much
Bittner
prefer it.
on those sites. Yeah, it's so much better, isn't it? You can actually have a real conversation. It's crazy. It's insane.
Yeah.
So we just,
All right, buddy.
Appreciate
We'll
you.
talk to you on
Thank you so
Saturday.
much. All right. Cheers. Thanks.
Yeah.
Stay good. Okay. And then, if I may, chat room. Hi, chat room. Love you guys. Oh, look at you guys filling up. And thank you, by the way, for the super chat. Colleen, that was so lovely. And Jerry, appreciate that as well. And Jen, thank you for gifting the memberships on YouTube. That was really nice. I noticed that when I was about an hour ago, and I didn't have a chance in the middle of the conversation to break that out. So I just want to thank you, not just for doing that, but also on behalf of all the people who get to become members on the channel and all that stuff. Thanks, Michael, and this will be, and Ninka Crinkles for being on our Twitch as well, and everybody. And sorry about the weird kerfuffle on Facebook that happened for a while. I shut down and reconnected it, and it seemed to solve it sort of for us. I feel like I owe you guys some good news. There was good news today, but I want to show you guys something that will this open to the thing? Hold on to see if I can find it. Yeah, this is close to. See if this comes up. Boink. Yeah, here we go. Let me tell you something. Remember when there was conversations about how Biden had this conversation or had this speech that he gave about renewables and the conversion from fossil fuels to renewables that was going to happen over the next couple of years, and that Trump will not be able to undo it. Why? Why do they think that? This is one of the reasons. And this is just a myriad of reasons. This is a simple change in battery cycling and storage that two scientists in South Korea worked out. And this change singularly will be the difference. And it's probably a year and a half away before we start seeing this technology. And these are silicone based silicone diode anodes. I'll get ahead of myself. So researchers at Pohang, quit it, University of Science and Technology, have introduced a revolutionary technique that can amplify the energy storage capacity of batteries by an astonishing tenfold. This leap forward not only propels battery technology to new heights, but also has the potential to reshape the entire landscape of electric vehicles. And it understands the role of anode in batteries. The key to understanding battery function lies in the anode, the component responsible for storing power during charging and then releasing it when the battery is in use. In most modern lithium batteries, graphite is the predominant material used for anodes. However, Materials like silicon offer much greater energy capacity than graphite, making them highly desirable for more efficient battery designs. The challenge, however, has been in stabilizing a battery that uses a silicone anode. Silicone tends to expand during internal reactions with the battery, which can compromise its stability and safety. A breakthrough happened. They've developed a groundbreaking solution to this long-standing issue. They've engineered a special binding material that prevents a high-capacity silicon anode from expanding. The result is a lithium battery with 10 times the capacity of those with graphite anodes. While Postec's achievement is remarkable, they're not the only ones in the global race. Again, like I said, this is happening everywhere. There's no such thing as big battery any more than there's big pharma or big tech, and anybody who tells you there is selling you something, namely fear. There are a lot of competing interests where everybody is trying to outrun each other in these situations. Okay. Numerous teams around the world are working on a more sustainable and efficient solutions. For example, Chinese company developed an EV battery that uses sodium, a material that is both affordable and widely available, as a viable alternative to lithium. But it would undermine, by the way, not using lithium would undermine China's control on the supply of lithium. But since the United States discovered that we have a lot of lithium, they're like, oh, well, then fuck lithium. The only reason they didn't move on from it was because they thought they controlled the source of it. This is another oil situation, similar to what happened with OPEC. We sit on top of this shit, so we should make everybody reliant on it. Okay. Meanwhile, NASA is introducing a solid-state battery technology, good old NASA, which promises to be more compact and lightweight compared to traditional lithium batteries. Additionally, another researcher is exploring the creation of biodegradable batteries using crab shells. It's great, but it's a little fishy, and it stinks when you show up. But this is polyethylene glycol to regulate the physical properties and facilitate lithium-ion diffusion, resulting in thick, high-capacity electrode and maximum energy density found in lithium-ion batteries now. So this is how they worked it out. The implication for these advancements: efficient batteries are more essential, blah, blah, blah. We all know this. Solar and wind will store more of it, and this is how the battery stores it longer term. So I'm just telling you, one of the reasons why Biden said they're not going to be able to undo it is because while this stuff becomes news, and it's good that it becomes news, right? I'm glad that we have, that these things are happening and we find out when they happen. The government and the defense industry and the State Department are very aware of these things because they have ramifications financially, economically, psychosexually, philosophically for all countries in the world. If we find out that, oh shit, everything's going to be run off this 1 gram of stuff that's, boobaroo, that you can only find that the Waponis won't give you access to, go watch Joe versus the Volcano if you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Then you're at their whim. And that's not good. We've experienced this for decades with oil. And in the root of it has been terrorism and bizarre, cult-like followers of certain Abrahamic tribes fighting with each other for a long fucking time. If we can get to the point where nobody has to rely on what's buried under their neighbor's house, the whole game changes. And that's why I do Friday Eye on Fridays with our dear friend Rob Glenn. And Carl Alessi is going to be joining us as well to talk the NASA angle on this, because there's a bunch of shit, including that, the NASA solid state battery that's going to be a thing and will last for nearly ever. The nuclear diamond battery that I've talked about, they've had 2 big leaps forward in that, where almost every electronic device you would have next to it, especially cheap little electronics, toys and the like, could have one of these right next to the circuit and the speaker on it that would run at a low level the energy costs of that particular device. Like hearing aid side batteries just eliminated any implant that you would have that needs a battery. They just put that in there and it would last longer than you would. I will, Carl. I did. I don't know if I responded to you. I don't know if you saw my response about that, but we will talk tomorrow to make sure you're all clear and you're good. So that the upside of this is that you cannot put the toothpaste back in the tube. And there are a bunch of areas where Republicans will pretend they don't know this and then get elected and then do nothing about it. That's where, that's why Republicans always feel like Democrats get whatever they want and we don't get shit. Well, that's because we're there to build stuff and we actually do the work to build stuff. And Republicans that vote with it know that it has value, so they vote with it as well. But undoing it means without having a replacement, again, the repeal and replace ACA bullshit that we've had to deal with for the last fucking decade. All that is based on this absurd idea that you can snatch a rug and people won't mind. But they're standing on it. And they'll get mad. And more of them are your voters standing on, there are more maggots standing on that rug than there are blue voters. No matter what people say. Public education, vaccination, fluoridated water, regulations about food, all that stuff benefits, poor, impoverished whites in rural America far more than the people even in impoverished urban areas that have a substructure at least to work with. At least they have buses that can get you somewhere. Do you understand what I mean? Poor people in cities always have it slightly better than poor people in the middle of fucking nowhere because they can get somewhere. It's not as far a walk. And if it is, they can get a bus pass for free. So, and there's a lot of areas where that's true. Jennifer, thank you so much. Appreciate it. So anyways, thank you guys for joining me for the morning show. I'll see you this afternoon. And in the process of watch the doom sprayers around you. Okay, watch out for them because that don't comply in advance, don't obey in advance. That stuff you've been hearing. The same thing is true about your mood. Don't let them hijack your emotions. They're too valuable. It's too important that you're able to maintain your calm and your ability to focus and your empathy and all your good nature instead of letting them panic you into a fucking corner and then dictate how you should feel about shit. The answer is no. If you want to follow that kind of mental weakness and lack of ethics and moral ineptitude, then TYT is perfect for you. They've got everything you're going to need to cry about shit you could change and convince you that you shouldn't while you shit the bed. It's like a lecture series on how to shit the bed politically. Meanwhile, if you actually give a goddamn, I'll be here for you. And also, sorry. Yeah, Chris Wray resigned. Yeah, that'll be does that mean, yeah, that would mean Biden gets to appoint somebody. That's funny. Or is he announcing his resignation once they come in? Is that the idea? Rather than let him drum him out? We'll see. Again, it was Trump's guy. The fact that he has to replace, yeah, whatever. TYT just lost another content creator. Well, the fucking headliners are bailing on that dump. Get the fuck out of here. Meanwhile, I'll be here being a boss. All right, love you guys. I'll see you this afternoon. Take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else. Oh, wait, I have to see if something works. And God damn it, if anybody gives me shit, I'm not. That's my new rant video effect. So, how do you like them apples? Fuck you, TYT. Huh? That's good stuff. All right, it works. I made that and I was worried that it wouldn't. Actually, I had to give it a test run in case I need it this afternoon, which I think I will. Share the show. Come on. Facebook. Throw me some stars. Do something. Contribute. God damn.